Hello everyone, I'm beginning a new series today on Shakespeare Sonnets, and each video will include a reading of the sonnet followed by a brief commentary on select sonnets of Shakespeare. Now these won't cover every aspect of close reading, but I'll be making comments on the plain meaning and the poetic qualities of the poem, and the occasional comment on critical appreciation where appropriate. Now in the description of each video I have placed a list of books for further reading, some general and historical information on the sonnets, and in each commentary I'll give attention to one or more special features of the poem. And in Sonnet 1 we'll be focusing on argumentation and logic. Sonnet 1 may have been written later after all the other sonnets as a preface or introductory sonnet to this whole collection. We don't know, but it shares themes with the sonnets that follow. It has themes of beauty, of love, immortality, time, and death. In a way, it's all of the sonnets in miniature. Now, sonnets 1 through 17 are sometimes called the procreation sonnets, or the young man sonnets, or even the marriage sonnets, because they traditionally are understood to be addressed to a young man, persuading him to marry. So they are naturally argumentative, like most of Shakespeare's sonnets, and there is good evidence that the speaker is addressing a young man here, but it is important to notice that he does not address him as such in this sonnet. Now in this sonnet, the narrator chides the young man for wasting his beauty by keeping it to himself. So here's Sonnet 1 by William Shakespeare. From fairest creatures we desire increase, that thereby beauty's rose might never die. But as the riper should by time decease, his tender air might bear his memory. But thou, contracted to thine own bright eyes, feed'st thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel, making a famine where abundance lies, thyself thy foe, to thy sweet self too cruel. Thou that art now the world's fresh ornament and only herald to the gaudy spring, within thine own bud buryest thy content, and tender churl mak'st waste in niggarding. Pity the world, or else this glutton be, to eat the world's due by the grave in thee. Alright, so let's get a sense of the plain meaning of the sonnet before going any further. The plain meaning is also called just the message of the poem, the prose meaning, what information the poet is trying to convey. And it begins with a general principle here in these first 4 lines, this quatrain. The general principle is this: from fair creatures we desire more of them. That's what's meant by increase. So that, thereby, so that beauty's rose might never die. But as the riper, what is the riper? That's the older rose. So that as the riper rose should by time die, decease, his tender air might bear his memory. So the older rose fades and dies, and a new rose, a new bud blossoms, and so beauty keeps going. And so this is an aesthetic principle that's being put forth here, a general principle that applies to all sorts of things. Gardening, for instance. Here, beauty's rose is a beautiful Elizabethan symbol for youthful prime. So he's drawing an analogy between the youth's beauty and the rose. But before we move on, I just want to note the sounds in these lines. Fairest and desire. They would have sounded more similar in the original pronunciation. The 2 words would have sounded more like fairest or desire. And of course we have increase. With creatures, we have that E sound here, which is carried also into decease. We also have the sounds of I, thereby beauty's rose might never die, as the riper should by time decease. So we've got this musical quality to these lines that just carry the sonnet through, so be aware of that because it's all throughout the sonnet. So the general principle is when something's beautiful, we want to make more beautiful things out of it. We want to propagate beauty. This is the aesthetic principle. And then he moves into the application. Here's a general principle in these first 4 lines. Now he moves to the application. But thou. Here we have this very logical word, but. Shakespeare's sonnets are usually very logically structured. But thou, addressing the young man, we say, or the whom he calls tender churl later. But thou, contracted or married to thine own bright eyes, feedst thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel, making a famine where abundance lies. Here we have a pair of opposites, famine and abundance. Thyself thy foe, to thy sweet self too cruel. Another pair of opposites here. Thou, again addressing the young man, that art now the world's fresh ornament, our prized possession, and only herald to the gaudy or extravagant spring. Within thine own bud buryest thy content. So what is he accusing him of here? He's basically accusing him of narcissism, of keeping his beauty to himself by not marrying and by not propagating beauty by having children. It's a strange argument, but this is the argument of most of the sonnets, 1 through 17. So the allusion that's going on in these 8 lines is largely to Ovid's Metamorphoses, the story of Narcissus, in which Narcissus falls in love with himself, becomes his own foe, right? And to himself is too cruel, bringing his own downfall by being in love with himself. So he says, within thine own bud, bringing back, linking that symbol and the general principle here, beauty's rose, within your own bud, buryest thy content, when implicitly he should be burying his content in someone else, someone to marry. And he calls him tender churl, who makes waste in niggarding. So we have some unusual vocabulary here. Tender churl, a churl was a person of low status. So a tender churl was somebody who was naive, a naive person of low status. Makes waste in niggarding. And niggarding means to be stingy or greedy. And what is he greedy? He's greedy about his own beauty. He feeds on his own light's flame, his own beauty, and doesn't seek it elsewhere. So after this accusation, in these following 5 through 12, these lines 5 through 12, the accusation, the poet, or the narrator gives him this ultimatum: to pity the world, or else this glutton be. To eat the world's due, that is, what rightly is owed to the world, which is to marry and have children. It goes back to that injunction in Genesis. It goes back to the Elizabethan worldview. Very biblically based, was that to be fruitful and multiply was the purpose of man, one of the purposes of humanity. So this is what he's due to the world, to have children, to marry, but he's not. So he says, pity the world, or else this glutton be, to eat the world's due by the grave and thee. In a way, he's saying that either marry and do your duty, do what you owe to the world, which is to have children, or consume yourself, be this glutton, to eat what you owe to the world, and to die twice, once by the grave, which is going to consume everyone anyway, and then secondly by yourself, which is a death that you can actually prevent, the narrator is saying. So let's read this again, having unpacked some of the difficult language, and listen for the lyrical quality. From fairest creatures we desire increase, that thereby beauty's rose might never die. But as the riper should by time decease, his tender air might bear his memory. But thou, contracted to thine own bright eyes, feedst thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel, making a famine where abundance lies, thyself thy foe, to thy sweet self too cruel. Thou that art now the world's fresh ornament and only herald to the gaudy spring, within thine own bud buryest thy content, and, tender churl, makest waste in niggarding. Pity the world, or else this glutton be, to eat the world's due, by the grave and thee. Now, there's certainly more to be discussed in this poem. If you noticed anything else, feel free to mention that in the comments below. Hope this was helpful, and until next time.